I'm Dr. Sarah Olivo.
And I'm Dr. Liz Seidler, and you're listening to College is Fine, Everything's Fine.
We have a microdose episode, which we're bringing to you for two reasons, I would say. One is because sometimes you just need a quick hit. You don't need the whole shebang. And a lot of the skills we talk about don't need a full discussion. They're pretty easy to explain. And the other is when we get really busy and we don't have time to do a full episode. What do you know? I'm just saying maybe those are correlated a little bit. But
Right.
Honestly, I do think that we appreciate microdose episodes for the first reason more than anything else.
And I think a second reason is Sarah and I talk a lot about skills, and we don't have a lot of time in other episodes to kind of unpack what they are. And this skill is a fan favorite. Wouldn't you say, Sarah?
You know, it's one that I really love to talk to people about, but it's a son of a bitch
Hard.
to do sometimes.
I know. It's so hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And should we tell them what it is, Sarah?
They're probably just chomping at the bit to know the name of it. Go for it, DBT queen.
Okay. It's opposite action. Let me tell you a little bit about what it is. So
Yeah.
essentially, this skill comes from DBT. We've talked about that. Quick note if you're a new listener, that's Dialectical Behavior Therapy. It's a skills-based treatment for a lot of emotional disorders. And opposite action is a skill used to change unwanted emotions. I said it's a fan favorite because most people come to see me are feeling an emotion a lot of the time that they don't want to feel. So this is the skill for you if you're one of those people. And I think all of us probably already use this skill a lot every day. We're not even fully aware of it. And we know it works. And in short terms, it's essentially doing the opposite of what your emotion is telling you to do.
I'll add that this really ties to something we've talked about a lot, which is so many people come to me and they're like, I want to feel better. So let me just tell you how I think about things and then I'll feel better. And I'm working with them a lot to say, hey, you know what? Sometimes you change your actions first and the feeling comes after it, that they're related. You can change thoughts and feel better, and you can change actions and have calmer or happier thoughts. So I think this ties into a lot of the things we've been saying across episodes, but we just wanted to really hone in on this particular topic as a skill in and of itself. We didn't want to muddle it up with other discussions.
I think to start it, this skill works best in 3 circumstances. So I'm going to review that. So the first is sometimes even though we know our emotion doesn't make sense, like we're like, for example, I'm terrified to fly, for example, and we kind of check the facts, the probability or likelihood of something happening to you when you're flying is really low. But knowing something's dangerous doesn't really change the fact that we're really fearful and kind of panicky about it. So that's a good time to use opposite action, that we've kind of checked the facts of the situation, but our anxiety is still really intense. That would be a good time to use this skill. Can you think of a second time, Sarah? Maybe another opportunity that it would be important to use the skill?
A lot of times the emotion is justified. And by the way, we say justified, it means, like you said, does it fit the facts, right? It's not to say no one understands why you're feeling that way. Sometimes you might feel sad about something and it doesn't necessarily fit the facts. You hadn't had a loss, but you're just having a down day. It's not to say, oh, that's crazy. It's this idea that does the emotion fit sort of the reason we have it as a human, right? So we have fear to keep us safe. We have sadness to help us sort of withdraw and regroup. And so if our emotions don't fit those kind of strict facts, oftentimes, it's helpful to create an opposite action to go with it. And then other times, our emotions really do fit the facts. We might have a reason to feel a little guilty about something. But I always think that there are some emotions where there's like a hair trigger pull. Guilt is one of them. Shame is one of them, where it's like, okay, maybe you might have done something. Maybe you should have called a friend and you didn't, and it hurt their feelings and you feel bad, right? But if you're just like going on and lamenting with guilt and just like you can't get past it and you've apologized and you're apologizing again, and you're apologizing again, sometimes the emotion itself might be justified at sort of a smaller level, but it feels big and it's higher in intensity than what you want. That's another time to use opposite action.
Great. And the last time an example that we want to use opposite action is when the emotion's justified, but it's getting in the way of us reaching a goal. And my favorite example, and buckle up, Sarah, this is a good example, has to do with a client who, if you could imagine this, did not want to see me. And
what?
I know.
Blasphemy.
And so she begrudgingly came. And when I went to the waiting area, she had a pillowcase on her lap, but there was no pillow in it. There was some sort of object. So she comes into my office and she whips out a 5-foot Albanian python. So if people aren't familiar, that's a yellow and white snake with red eyes.
Like the kind you hold at like one of the crazy circus fairs?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, guys, I live in Connecticut. I don't really encounter this species on a regular basis. I did not think I had a fear of snakes, but little did I know that this snake hadn't gone to the bathroom in 2 months and was really agitated by that. So the whole session, essentially, in the beginning, it was just like hissing at me. And basically, I found out that I was taller than where the snake was and it was threatened by me. So we had to sit on the floor.
You are a tall drink of water.
Yeah. So we had to sit on the floor. Now, okay, my urge in this moment was to like run the hell out of the office and avoid, like cancel the session. Was that really my goal? My goal was like, oh my gosh, this client came who hates me. They made it here and I'm a therapist. I want to like conduct this session. So this is a good example where my emotions justified. It's reasonable. Now it wasn't poisonous, but it could have like asphyxiated me. I think that's how they kill people or animals. And it makes sense to want to leave the situation, but it wasn't consistent with what my goals were. So I think like keep those in mind when we've checked the facts, but we still kind of feel the emotion. Sarah mentioned when the emotion is not justified or the intensity doesn't fit the facts of the situation, or maybe your emotion's justified, but acting on it's going to get in the way of what your goals are in the situation. We're going to practice the skill of opposite action.
I'm laughing because I have a few thoughts. One is that snake was the biggest middle finger this girl could have sent you.
100%.
It was literally like a 300-pound middle finger. I feel like I have to use opposite action a lot when I'm driving. If somebody cuts me off or if I feel like I'm in traffic, and it's very understandable to be frustrated by these things. If someone in a powerful position is just jerked to you for no reason, you have every right to feel pissed off. But ultimately, to scream at that person or to like try to run somebody off the road, these are not helpful. And so those are times where I find that I'm using opposite action a lot.
Okay. We've got 7 steps for opposite action. We're going to walk you through them and hopefully you can start practicing the skill. So this is the first step seems so simple, but it's really important. It's like identify what is the emotion you're experiencing and to name it. And the reason why this is important, Sarah alluded to this, is that every emotion has a different action urge. Our emotions telling us like naturally to do some. And I think maybe we'll go through 3 examples of like the most common ones. And Sarah already said it, anxiety. Our urge is to avoid a situation. What's another one, Sarah?
So yeah, there's anxiety. So my sort of bread and butter is anxiety and OCD work, right? So I'm constantly talking to people about you've got anxiety. Typically it's sort of a false alarm and your approach is to escape or avoid it. And that's actually keeping your anxiety around. So how are we slowly with some help and some support and some skills approaching situations that are really dangerous? I think sadness is another one we mentioned, where when people are sad, when they've had a loss in some way, that, and Liz, you can sort of add on any other ways that sadness might feel really justified, but definitely when you've had a loss in some way, loss of an experience, loss of a dream, loss of a relationship, loss to other things like death where there's grief, that it makes sense for the action urge to go with that, which is to withdraw, sort of go inward, and to be a bit self-protective, to not feel like you have to go out. I always say, if someone is like, imagine a cave-dwelling mother back in the day who might have lost a child, and she's going out and she's sad and she's morose and she's sad because she's missing this baby. And she goes out and she like gathers plants and berries and things like that in that state, like the likelihood that she's able to do that and focus, no, she's going to be completely distraught. She's likely to pick up something that could be maybe poisonous or not helpful. So like that's adaptive to when you've had a loss. Just kind of go inward, allow yourself some time and some space.
So our emotions make sense a lot of the time, but sometimes they stay around too long or they become ineffective or they don't make sense. We're feeling them. We're not really sure why. So we're going to identify the emotion, whether it's sadness, guilt, anxiety, shame, fear, etc. The second step, which we talked about earlier, is we're going to check the facts. Does it make sense to kind of feel this emotion in the situation? And then what are we going to do next, Sarah?
We're going to think about and identify the action urges that go with it. I have a lot of people, I said this before, guilt is one that comes up a lot where someone has done nothing wrong. Guilt is there as a little ding, 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 Jiminy Cricket on our shoulder to say, hey, maybe you could, you need to do a little bit better, right? But sometimes people have done, honestly, nothing wrong whatsoever, but the guilt is extreme. Sometimes even with boundary setting, we might see this. So they've set a really appropriate boundary. The person doesn't love it and they feel guilty. It's like, no, you've done nothing wrong. There's no that emotion is sort of trigger happy. But the action urge that goes with it is to apologize or to take something back. So it's really important to say, okay, I'm feeling guilty. And I can notice that I want to keep apologizing or taking back that boundary. I'm feeling anxious. I notice that I want to take back or I want to avoid or not go to that party or not call that person. Another thing I also think about is sometimes and why it's important to identify the emotion is so many people feel something like anger, but underneath it is an emotion that's a bit bigger. And that's probably a whole nother microdose episode.
Right.
But it's why when you think about the action urges, sometimes that helps you identify what's really going on.
Yep. Good. And then you want to ask yourself, is expressing this emotion or acting on these urges effective? And, we did another microdose episode on effectiveness. Really what this is about is thinking more about the long term, about your values, your goals in the situation, that it might make sense to feel that emotion. It might be justified, but it's not consistent with what your goals are in that situation.
If all these things come together and you realize that your action urge isn't helpful or the emotion isn't justified or the intensity is maybe a little bit too big. So now you want to think, okay, what's literally flip the coin? What are some opposite actions that I could do? In anxiety, this is essentially all the work I'm doing all the time. Instead of escape or avoid, it's approach. And all the different ways you can approach, right? Think about if you're escaping or avoiding a situation that you're really afraid of. Okay, how do you start to approach and do those more? If it's guilt and you realize, I don't really need to feel guilty, how can you act proud of your choices?
And an important point, the next step is to do it 100%. So, example of this is I work with a lot of people with social anxiety and college students, and I'll get them to go to a party, let's say. And they'll come back and they're like, opposite action sucks. I was anxious the whole entire time. So then I kind of walk them through what they did at the party. And then they tell me they're essentially in the corner on their phone and they didn't talk to anyone. They avoided eye contact. And then they thought the whole time about how everyone thinks they're weird. That's not doing opposite action all the way. So when we think about it, it's not, Sarah and I are talking a lot about your behavior, but when you're practicing opposite action, you're doing it with your thoughts, you're doing it with your behavior, your facial expressions, your body posture. You're tackling your emotion kind of on all those components and you're doing it 100%. So if the skill's not working, I always say people check in a little bit. Were you doing something with your body to communicate that you should still be anxious, even though you put yourself in the situation?
Sometimes people will say, well, I want to have integrity, right? I don't want to act a certain way. And we're saying like, look, the whole point is this is where you would be acting and how you'd be acting if you could take that emotion away. If I had a magic wand and I just took away your anxiety, I took away your sadness, your sort of guilt, your shame. If I had a magic wand and I took that away and it wasn't your emotion guiding your behavior, how would you act? And in that moment, if you felt proud, you as a person felt proud, how would you show proudness? So it's not about putting on a show. It's not about being cocky instead of being shy. It's about saying, how would I act if this emotion wasn't driving my behavior? And I think that sometimes helps people realize you're not asking you to like fake it till you make it so much. We're saying the emotion can't drive the behavior that you're engaging in.
That's a good point.
And then the other thing is keep doing it because you're right. Sometimes even if you do act all the way, and remember at the beginning of this, I said it's a son of a bitch to practice. Even if you do it all the way, there's not a guarantee. It most likely will make you feel the emotion that you're trying to act.
Mm-hmm.
It's the quickest way to make that happen. It's not always a guarantee. Sometimes it takes some practice.
Right.
It takes a few trials before it feels really genuine. So for instance, if someone is, classic in anxiety, we talk about exposure or approaching things that you fear. Well, we have a little riding the wave, right? You sort of ride the wave of anxiety, you stick it out. And at the end, you probably feel braver than if you'd never done it in the first place because you've seen success. But you do experience anxiety while you're trying to do that, right? You're acting brave by staying, but you're still feeling internally some of those emotions because it's almost like habit. And the likelihood that you're going to feel bravery by doing that is higher than if you hadn't tried it in the beginning. And the more you practice it, the less the anxiety is sort of churning underneath you. It's just, it sort of starts a new habit in a way. So repetition is not a bad thing. And repeating skills doesn't mean they don't work. All right. So, a lot of times, listen, we ask you to give it a try. Please understand that what we're asking you to do is just to go out, give this a try, see how it works. If you have a problem with it, if you feel like it's hard, let us know. Tell us in the comments, get in touch with us individually, send us a DM. We'd love to hear, and we can always follow up with a bit more of some examples that you're bringing to the table where it felt like this was a little bit confusing. But we always ask everybody to have a beginner's mind. And if you're listening, try to give opposite action at least a go this week.
And we'll share some tips on social media, some visuals, a video, so you can get more info on how to practice the skill.
Thank you to our guests for sharing their stories and their advice. This podcast is for college students, and we want input by college students, so please reach out by text, email, or voice memo to collegesfinepodcast@gmail.com or 929-500-2231. Tell us your story, give us tips on topics you'd like to hear, or give us feedback about an episode.
Follow us on TikTok and Instagram at College is Fine Podcast for episode announcements and resources. And last but not least, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast. Every hit of that plus button helps us keep going.